when insulin is stimulated, then the body goes into a mode of storing fat and storing energy and metabolizing and breaking down those sugars. And that may be why this might be one of the most common things that I explain to people who have insomnia that they don't understand is that if you're eating within 2 to 3 hours of bedtime, then your body is in a mode of working that insulin pathway and it is unable to deeply rest.
Have you ever wondered why some people seem to maintain their energy, vitality, and sharpness well into their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even beyond that, while others struggle with fatigue, illness, and decline? Is it luck or is it something else? And more importantly, what can we do about it? Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to the Healing Catalyst. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm Dr. Avanti, and I am so excited that you're here with me. Today, we're continuing our discussion about longevity with a special 3-part series inspired by my new book, The Longevity Formula. In the book, I explore how we can not only extend our lifespan, but more importantly, our health span, the years that we live with health and vitality. It's all about blending the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda with the latest science and medical technology to help you slow down the aging process and truly thrive as you age. If you want to dive deeper, make sure that you pre-order the Longevity Formula. Pre-orders are so important to get the book to more people who really need this information. And when you pre-order, you'll get an exclusive sneak peek of the first 2 chapters before the book is published. Plus, you'll be entered into giveaways for my favorite wellness products and a private session with me. But that's not all. Pre-ordering also gives you exclusive access to my 5-week Longevity Formula Instagram course, which will start in February of 2025. This course is packed with daily videos, worksheets, and weekly Q&A sessions with me, where I'll teach you the 5 longevity switches to extend your health span so that it equals your lifespan. Check the link in the show notes to pre-order your copy and get these amazing bonuses. Okay, so let's get back to the episode now. Today, I'm welcoming back my friend and colleague, Dr. Tanmeet Sethi, to continue our discussion of the 9 mechanisms of aging, to explain what these mechanisms are, and then share some simple, actionable steps to flip the longevity switches that slow these mechanisms to help you live better longer. Dr. Sethi is an integrative and psychedelic medicine physician, TEDx speaker, activist, and the author of Joy is My Justice, Reclaim Yours Now. She has nearly 3 decades of clinical experience. She's senior faculty at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine and also a clinical associate professor at the University of Washington. Her unique ability to blend modern science with ancient healing practices makes her the perfect partner for this conversation. Today, in part 2 of this 3-part series, we're diving into the next 3 mechanisms of aging: protein damage, dysregulated nutrient sensing, and mitochondrial dysfunction. And if you missed part 1 of this series, that episode is linked in the show notes for you. So if you've ever felt like aging is out of your control, this conversation will definitely change your mind. Dr. Tanmeet and I are here to show you how small, simple changes can have a massive impact on your health, your energy, and your longevity. I am so excited to share this episode, the second in our 3-part series, where we explore the mechanisms of aging and what we can do to take charge of our health and our longevity. I'm Dr. Avanti, and this is the Healing Catalyst. Hi, I'm Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh. In over 20 years of practicing both Western medicine and Eastern healing traditions, the most important thing that I've learned is that healing is a journey we take together. So on this podcast, I'll be demystifying Ayurveda and other integrated medicine, showing how these simple, ancient practices are the keys to unlocking a healthy modern life. We are all healing catalysts because healing starts within. It starts with you, and it starts right now. This is a Soulfire production. Hi, Tanmeet. I am so glad to be back with you again, my dear. How are you?
I'm good. I'm always excited for our talks.
I know. So am I. It's so fun. We just get on here and we just jam. It's so much fun.
It's like our version of guitar jamming. I always wanted to be a guitar jammer. Now I can just be a health jammer.
Well, it's also a way that we connect. I mean, it's a continuation of our private conversations that are not about our personal lives, but about the things we're thinking about in health and wellness. But, today is actually more specific because this is the second in our series about longevity. It's part 2. If the listeners haven't heard part 1, we'll link it in the show notes. And what we're doing is we're going through the 9 mechanisms of aging, doing 3 mechanisms each part of this 3-part series. And so today we're going to be talking about mechanisms 4, 5, and 6. And these are all the mechanisms that I talk about in my new book, The Longevity Formula. And so we're going to jump right in. And the 3 mechanisms we're going to talk about for everyone who's listening are protein damage, nutrient sensing or dysregulated nutrient sensing. And then the next one is mitochondrial dysfunction. And these are 3 of the 9 mechanisms that we are covering in this series. So let's jump in. Let's start with mechanism number 4, which is protein damage. I'll go ahead and start with this one. And sort of the overview of what it is that, in our cells, right, proteins are the building blocks of cells, tissues, organs. And they also make up all of the chemical messengers, such as hormones, neurotransmitters, enzymes. So really, proteins are so, so important for all functions of our bodies. And what happens is that as we age chronologically, protein damage will increase because of a couple of different things. First of all, there's the internal damage from damaged DNA, which was the first actual mechanism of aging that we talked about in part 1 of this series. But then there's also the external stressors, such as, toxins, oxidative stress. So all of these things can cause protein damage, which then, we have misfolding because proteins fold upon themselves, and that's how they sort of differentiate into their specific actions and what they do. And so if you have that misfolding or you have damaged DNA, so the proteins are not sequenced correctly, then you have all kinds of issues because they're involved in every single thing in the body. So really, that's sort of the overview of why protein damage is a mechanism of aging. Because again, as we age chronologically, protein damage becomes more and more of a problem because as we age, there's more chances of the proteins being damaged. And so then it leads to all these downstream effects sort of things. So that's for the overview.
Yeah, I like the way you describe that. You must have written a book about this.
I mean,
But
I wonder.
but it's helpful maybe to remind the listeners that these can sound really fancy and kind of complicated, but I think what I love about the way you describe them is just that if we really look at the bare bones of them, what we're really looking at is that your cellular health is impacted by everything you do. So everything we do on the macro level affects us on the micro level. And so I love that it always links back to that. And that's where Ayurveda comes really beautifully in there.
Yeah. And again, like we were talking about before, the reason that we need to be, worried about protein damage is that if we have protein damage, then that means those cells aren't functioning correctly and they're damaged cells. And basically, the accumulation of damaged cells is what causes the problem. If our bodies can't get rid of those damaged cells fast enough, they kind of hang out and cause this low level chronic inflammation, which then again leads to all of these problems, these illnesses that we associate with aging, right? that are not an inevitable part of aging, but are associated with aging because of aging, because of the higher likelihood that we have these damaged proteins sitting around and causing, damaged cells. So again, what we want to do is really increase that natural process we have in the body, which is called autophagy, right? We've talked about this before, where this is a natural process we have in our body, which basically cleans up all of that, all that junk that's sitting around, all those damaged proteins, all of the damaged cells. And that's what we want to increase. Because again, as we age chronologically, that process of autophagy starts to slow down. So what can we do on a macro level, like you were saying, to help with this micro level process of autophagy that's going on in our bodies all the time? That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and there's so many ways we can do that. I know you go into all these practices in your book, but if we want to just talk about a simple, I know it doesn't always sound easy, but a simple practice that could be something like intermittent fasting. And really, I think that's a fancy word even for what really Ayurveda is based on, which is aligning our body to the circadian and natural clock that it was meant to be aligned with,
Mm-hmm.
And what we're really talking about is giving our body and those cellular mechanisms a chance to rest and a chance to clean out debris. And so maybe that means we don't eat after dinner until breakfast and we get, I would advise everyone to get a sort of general 12-hour period where they're not eating if possible. And there are studies to show that at higher levels of fasting, more autophagy occurs. I think we can get, really caught in the weeds of that. And what we're really trying to say is breaking the habit of continually, we don't think of it this way, but continually eating is stressing our system, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that, what I don't know if you hear this, Avanti, but I hear from my patients a lot, like, I just have to sort of, it feels like I'm depriving myself or it feels like a restriction. And I think that that's a fair feeling. I'm not saying not to feel that, but what I really look at it is, can we look at it as a way to care for ourselves? That if it's 10:30 at night and we're in the middle of that autophagy phase, we don't want to break it. And so if you get a craving for hunger, that is not necessary. So it's just maybe mindless hunger or boredom hunger or comfort hunger. Can you say, no, maybe my body needs that care to rest. I think I should do this to help my body rest and clean out in the way that it needs to. Does that sound fair or a way to look at it?
Yeah, and absolutely. And also from an Ayurvedic standpoint, right? The middle of the day from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is a high pitta or high fire time, which means that our digestive fire or Agni is at its peak. Because again, if you think about the path of the sun, right? If we align with the sun is its hottest and brightest in the middle of the day. Same thing for our digestive fire. So that's why we always say, eat your largest and most difficult to digest meal in the middle of the day, according to Ayurveda. Now, the same thing is true at nighttime from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Again, these are all approximate times, right? That overnight period. Now, when we get the midnight munchies, like, we used to have in medical school and undergrad, and because we were up late, our brains are saying, oh, I'm hungry. But actually what's happening is our digestive fire is increasing. It's actually saying, no, this is time to turn up the volume on that digestion to clean up, not to eat more. And so from an Ayurvedic standpoint, right, it makes sense that we might think that we're hungry, but it's cleanup time. So there is a high digestive fire, but it's not for eating. It's for detoxifying, for cleaning up, for autophagy, right? We know that that's the sort of Western construct that goes along with this Ayurvedic principle. So I always found that so interesting because that for me explained why I would get the midnight munchies if I was up late. Even
Mm-hmm.
now, if I'm up too late, I'm like, oh, I could eat something. But I have to
Mm-hmm.
remind myself, no, no, no. That's not actually what my body is telling me. It's just saying, let's turn up the volume so we can clean up all the mess and make you feel better tomorrow.
Yeah, I like that reminder too, because what we're really saying also is that in this modern world that presents health challenges every corner, there's more stress and more insomnia, and so we are up later, even if it isn't for residency or a call or little children. It's also because we're worried about the world or the state of what may happen at our job or et cetera. And so I really like that reminder because I think we're all in a state of not sleeping to our natural rhythm as we could be, and many times of the year.
Yeah. And so, really, I think one of the ways that we can switch on the longevity switch that can counter this mechanism of aging of protein damage is to really do things that support this autophagy. And fasting, as you already mentioned, is what we know from the studies is one of the greatest stimulators of autophagy. And so when we get into this pattern of fasting overnight, right? Basically, don't eat when you're sleeping, when you should be sleeping, don't eat, right? If you can just get on that circadian rhythm of that 12 hours of no eating, you are kicking on that autophagy every night and helping your body clean up the mess, really. And that's really going to help with your longevity.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it really is a self care practice, not a restriction. It's really a way
Yes.
to really care for ourselves and make sure that our health span is longer.
And I think that your point really is really well taken, because I do know that there's all this pushback a lot in wellness, integrative medicine, when we talk about fasting. A few years ago, this idea of intermittent fasting sort of kind of blew up, right? And I was sort of like, well, this is just fasting that we've been doing for a long time. It was sort of a fancy way of talking about fasting, right? Of just not eating for 12 hours overnight and then extending that a little bit, right? Um, and there was a lot of pushback on, is this disordered eating practice? Are you, really sort of supporting a disordered eating practice by telling people to fast? And I think what you're really tapping into is that, well, of course, it can always be looked at that way. If it's restriction, then it's a different sort of thing, right? When you're really restricting to control something, that is disordered eating. When you are fasting and restricting your food intake overnight, you're doing it for a health benefit, right? For self-care. And so I think, again, it's all the perspective you have and how and the why behind what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think if you remind yourself that really what we're saying is to return to ancient and true practices, really. I mean, you could argue, I don't want to muddle the word because disordered eating is very serious and I take it very seriously. But I also think that, in a different way, our modern way of eating is dysfunctional, right? I mean, we have processed foods and food available to us. We have fire anytime we want. We have things in the cabinet anytime we want. And that is not how humans evolved, and so what we're saying is, a longevity practice is to return to ancient wisdom, that this whole idea, I mean, breakfast is break fast. That was the point of that name, is to break the fast. And so, coming back to that helps me to remember that I'm coming back to my center or ancient practice, not really trying to restrict things. But it's all a discussion.
Yes, absolutely. And so I just wanted to tap into that because I think that's an important point to sort of honor, is that, yeah, at any extreme, it can be an extreme. And what we're talking about is this exact thing about going back to ancient practices to support longevity and that's really the perspective we're coming at. We're not coming at it from a restrictive sort of practice that is sort of playing into diet culture, because that's a whole nother discussion that was happening and sort of a big criticism of the sort of intermittent fasting movement that was going on, and still is going on. Obviously, people are still talking about it because, again, we know from the studies and the data that autophagy, this fasting, really is a huge stimulator of autophagy, which is very good for longevity. So, from that
Yeah.
perspective. Okay, let's move on. So, the next mechanism that we're going to talk about, the next mechanism of aging is dysregulated nutrient sensing. And this kind of continues on the food that we were talking about. And really, what this one is about, that there are some key nutrient sensing pathways that really help to regulate our metabolism and our energy. And really, what these pathways do is they tell our bodies whether we should be building new cells when there's lots of nutrients, right? Using up that the extra nutrients that we have lying around from food to build, versus repairing and recycling, or autophagy, when nutrients are scarce. And the problem is sort of what you were alluding to before, is that when we have nutrients available all the time, because we are eating all the time and it's always available, our body is always in that building mode. So when does it have any time to clean up? That's the problem. And so we need to have this balance, is the issue. And so we have so much dysregulation of these nutrient pathways that were actually designed to keep that in check, so that we could go between building and breaking to have that balance, rather than always being in building mode, which is where we are a lot in modern day because of nutrients always being available. And so, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how in depth you want to get in this because I know that you go into four of the main pathways in your book, and I think they're really important for people to know about. And also, I think, we could get stuck in the weeds a little bit. So I think what the way that you described it is super important. And I think that one of the, just for those, well, none of us have gotten the book yet. It's not out yet, but it will be in December. And once you do, then read about them. The one that you will read about is insulin. I think is the easiest one for people
Mm-hmm.
that people have heard about. The
Sure.
other three are less understood by, regular non-medical
Mm-hmm.
listeners. But I think insulin's a really good one, because what we're really saying is that when insulin is stimulated, then the body goes into a mode of, storing fat and storing energy and metabolizing and breaking down those sugars. And that may be why this might be one of the most common things that I explain to people who have insomnia that they don't understand, is that if you're eating within 2 to 3 hours of bedtime, then your body is in a mode of working that insulin pathway, and it is unable to deeply rest. You're telling the body to work instead of to rest. And so we need insulin. We need it to break down what it breaks down. But when it's constantly stimulated and stimulated at the wrong times, then it's a real problem. And I think this brings back into, focus the practice of resting your gut, resting your body, and also remembering when to eat. So that idea you said of eating in the middle of the day, for instance, when that pathway can be most optimized. That's just one example of how to think about this longevity switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and also insulin also, there are studies that have been shown that it actually affects melatonin release as well, which is our sleep hormone, right? And so it has an effect where can inhibit or decrease the amount of melatonin that's released. And so again, if we need melatonin to help us go to sleep, if we're eating too close to bedtime or, later in the day, we're actually turning off melatonin or inhibiting it, which then causes more issues with sleep. And so these are all connected. And again, I always think it's so incredible that, the ancients knew this, that like, don't eat too late in the day, as nature is going to bed. You should be going to bed and not be eating. They didn't know the exact science or the data, but it turns out that it's all true, right? From a physiological standpoint, we know that it's affecting the hormones in the body that then cause more problems down the line. So um, there is that piece too, that insulin also affects the melatonin release. And then the other three nutrient sensing pathways, we'll just mention them really quickly, are mTOR, AMPK, and sirtuins. And you can read about these more in the book, because I actually think that if we talk about them too much in detail, they get very confusing, because there's negative pathway, negative feedback and positive feedback, and it just gets a little confusing to describe. But basically, there are these four key nutrient sensing pathways that get dysregulated and cause all kinds of problems when we're talking about longevity. And they've actually been, characterized in a lot of the literature as actual longevity switches, that when we can regulate these nutrient sensing pathways, we're actually turning those switches on. So they're quite important from a longevity standpoint.
Oh, I think it's worth mentioning too that how we eat matters, right? I mean, what we're talking about is how we absorb nutrients and how our body knows to absorb nutrients. And you do that most in a restful state. And so, 25% of meals in the United States, at least, are eaten in a car. Not sitting at a table, resting with loved ones. And so, and I know often, I and my colleagues are guilty of this at work, and eating while we chart at the computer. And, these are not optimal ways to absorb nutrients. And so, if you've ever heard the term mindful eating, what it really means is to eat when you eat and do other things when you're not eating. And I don't do this 100% of the time, as I just mentioned. I think it's hard in this modern world. And yet there are times where we could just stop and do that and then do our next task. But we're habituated in some ways to go, go, go.
Yeah, and I think that this, goes back to some of the things I used to talk about in my first book, or that I've written about, which is, this idea of the principle of Ayurvedic eating, which includes that, what we eat is important, but why, where, when, and how much are actually more important, or
Mm.
just as important, and we don't always think about that. So, to your point of where are we eating? If we're eating in the car and on the go, that is not mindful. That is not going to help with our nutrient sensing. It's going to dysregulate it even more. And even the why of being mindful, is this for nourishment, or is this just to eat? For boredom, or for entertainment, or whatever it is. And the how, the when and how much, that really plays into sort of the Ayurvedic clock that we've already kind of talked about. And so all of these pieces, I think, are so important in the nutrient sensing pathways, because again, when we align with nature and sort of the natural rhythm of the day that also happens to coincide with our circadian clock, right? It's all circadian medicine. It all kind of works together to help optimize nutrient sensing and those nutrient sensing pathways, so that they are more regulated. So that's really, really important also. So what you want to do from that perspective of when and how much, eat the largest and hardest to digest meal in the middle of the day, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and then eat lighter, sort of easier to digest meals for breakfast and dinner. And you want to eat
Mhm.
them a little earlier, right? And again, I always say that if the food has been cooked by an external fire or broken down by an external fire, your internal fire doesn't have to work as hard. And so that's what you want to do, is you want to aid your body in the morning and in the evening, when sort of the digestive fire is starting to go down, or is starting to heat up in the morning, right? Again, the path of the sun through the sky, you want to help your body out to be able to digest better. And, an external fire, so cooked foods that maybe are broken down a little bit more, less raw foods, those are things that are going to be harder to digest the food. So cooked, warm foods, easier for the body to digest. So just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, those are good reminders.
And then there's also a couple of different, herbs, if you think about spice as medicine, right? That can also help with insulin sensitivity, right? There's always cinnamon that always helps with that. Turmeric, ginger, these are all spices that you can add that can help with that nutrient sensing pathway of insulin. And so just even adding that into your food, whether it's adding it into your breakfast porridge or oatmeal, or adding turmeric and ginger into a soup or a stew, that can really help with that insulin sensing as well. And are there any foods that you suggest to your patients as far as?
I mean, there are, cinnamon for sure. And I love cinnamon because it offers a sweetness that maybe can replace some sugar. So we get some good insulin sensing in replacement for sugar. And then, I mean, there are different foods like bitter gourd and so forth that are really good for insulin. But I try to just focus on produce and protein. I try to focus on peas for insulin sensing, mostly because those allow the body's natural pathways of allow insulin to not function in the way that we don't want it to, which is overstimulated and causing inflammation.
Yeah, the protein in the produce really does help with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to mechanism 6, which is
Yeah.
the next mechanism of aging that we wanted to talk about, which is mitochondrial dysfunction. Do you want to describe this one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, mitochondria are really the powerhouses of every cell in the body, and they're exactly how we promote and activate and make cellular energy. And so they're how a cell functions, but on the micro level. And on the macro level, that translates into energy as well. So we feel that when our mitochondria are depleted, we feel less energy. When our mitochondria are dysfunctional or not working due to many practices from the environment, toxins, different kinds of inflammatory foods, but also aging. Can just at the heart of aging, we have trouble keeping our mitochondrial functional. And so this idea of supporting our mitochondria as we age is a really, really important one. And I think one that is more and more talked about, don't you think, in mainstream wellness culture? I feel like I hear about mitochondria way more than I did when I was in medical school, from different supplements to different ways that wellness people are talking about it. So it's important to understand that mitochondria, when they're affected by things like aging or toxins or pesticides, that then it can lead to inflammatory disorders, cardiovascular disease, different kinds of autoimmune disorders. It runs the gamut because mitochondria are the powerhouses of every single cell. So we could talk about mitochondria for an entire podcast, but I think what might be most helpful is to talk about how to breathe in new energy into the body for the mitochondria to heal and function. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I do want to mention is also that, mitochondria, because of the powerhouses of the cells, we have higher numbers of mitochondria in our muscles. And
Yes.
here's the issue. The other piece of this is that not only as we age do the mitochondria start to function poorly, and we have problems with mitochondria. The other issue is that we have muscle loss as we age. And so
Yes.
therefore, right there, because muscles have the most mitochondria in them, we are then losing the number of mitochondria that we have. And so it's sort of this double whammy that's going on. And that's why, we talk a lot about, really, really needing to maintain muscle mass as we get older for all kinds of reasons, for support, for our flexibility, our strength, movement, all of those things, but also because of this issue, because of mitochondria. So that's another piece that's important. So yes, let's go back to what you were talking about, as far as what are some of the practices that we can do to sort of counteract this mitochondrial loss and to help sort of boost them up is through bringing more oxygen, more prana into the body.
Yeah. And I mean, that muscle fact is a really good segue into just movement in general, right? So,
Yes.
if we can move our bodies, we contract our muscles with every movement, and we allow those mitochondria to be exercised and to remain as functional and we allow ourselves to create more muscle cells that have more mitochondria that then give us a chance to have more functional mitochondria in the body.
And that's why, you'll read any literature. There's so many studies that show that, some very, very gentle sort of lightweight training as we get older, especially for women, for all of the bone benefits as well, for osteoporosis and, fractures, all that kinds of stuff, really important. But also generally for, men and for anybody, some light weight training is really important as we get older. And so that can even be, light 1, 2 pound weights with some, just very simple movements. You could put also some weights on your ankles and go for a walk, but anything that's even weight bearing. So that's why yoga is so incredibly beneficial because of that weight bearing sort of component of it. It can help to strengthen the muscles and again, increase the mitochondria and the mitochondrial function. So that's really important. As far as one of the practices that we can do. So I do talk about in the book 10 poses for 10 more years of age, that are really really helpful. But again, just a simple walk with some weights on your feet, on your ankles, that's a great way to build some muscle right there.
Yeah, and I'm really loving lately using weighted vests with my patients. You can get really they're they're light ones. This is not like I'm not asking people to become a military workout person, but they have 5 pound. They're usually about 5 pounds. These weighted vests, and they just allow a little more resistance and working against your body weight a little more, so that that walk becomes a little more supportive of your mitochondria. And I really like that too. So, however, you can get, I love combining walking with a little weight. It's just perfect.
Yeah, I feel like for so many reasons because it's again, you're doing that muscle built, that sort of weight training without even knowing that you're doing it. So you're doing that weight bearing, increasing the weight bearing. But then you're also getting the natural sunlight, you're getting prana moving through you, right? There's sort of like all these multiple effects that you can have at the same time, which let's do it. That's easier to get that in then.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a high yield activity.
Very much
um,
so.
and if you're, really conscious of your breath while you're walking, especially if you're taking nice deep inhalations and exhalations, if ideally nasally breathing, but that's a whole nother topic. But even just focusing on deep breathing. So you're really trying to get the most prana or oxygen into your lungs and your body. That's really helpful. So walking with weight or without weight just allows a lot of different ways to become more mindful of your body and giving it what it needs.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So what are some of the nasal breathing practices that you've prescribed? I think that would be really interesting to talk about too.
I mean, for one, I'm going to be transparent with listeners. I am working on this because I'm a mouth breather myself,
I'm a total
and
mouth breather
yeah,
breather.
and I've decided one of the worst things for my health, and I'm trying really hard. So for me, it's really easy. And when I talk to patients about just starting with some mindfulness, attention to breathing through my nose and out through my nose, and starting really light with breathing through the nose and maybe out through the mouth. And then, making it easier for yourself until you can get to in and out through the nose. I do some alternate nostril breathing, which is an Ayurvedic practice that I like, but I really don't move people to that until we've just even tried to it is a little jarring to try to focus on nasal breathing in general. But I don't know if people out there have tried it, but I even have noticed that if I'm nasally breathing at night during sleep, my sleep scores on my trackers are way better, that I'm getting more oxygen in and out. And so it's really just for me starting with people bringing attention. How about you?
Yeah, I think that it's the attention. Awareness is always the first step, right? I know people are probably have heard me say that ad nauseum on this podcast, but awareness is always the first step. And I do think that the idea of doing, inhales through the nose and exhales through the mouth first is probably easier to do than the other way around. I find that that's just sort of a natural inclination to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. I Because I do think that if you just try to keep your mouth closed the whole time and breathe in and out through your nose, inhale and exhale, it can become very anxiety provoking. I know it is for me. I get
Yes.
really anxious, especially if I'm working a little harder, if I'm walking up a hill or, having going at a faster pace. It can really, really start to stress me out. And that's not what we want to do. So I do think the idea of breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth is a really good place to start. I'm really curious. You just mentioned that when you sleep and you're doing nasal breathing, you have better sleep scores on your wearable, your trackable stuff. How are you doing that? Are you taping your mouth at night?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Are we
This
are we going to
this
get into this? Yeah.
Let's talk about it because I mean, it's something that a lot of people have been talking about is
Yeah.
this idea of mouth taping at night.
Yeah, I am. I am really moving into that as a nightly practice, and for me too. Personally, moving into menopause also changes your tissues and has really made me even more of a mouth breather and caused me to snore more. I mean, all kinds of changes in my body, and so I have been really consistently doing taping at night and finding it to be really useful for me. I feel like I wake up rested, more rested. And I'm a good sleeper, but I notice a difference with mouth taping. And so, for anyone wondering about it, there are numerous mouth, because I know now somebody's listening and thinking, like, which mouth tape should I try?
Exactly.
And the answer is I don't know because it's so different for each person. So there are numerous mouth tapes on the market now. This is kind of a big thing. I think much bigger since James Nestor's book came out a few years ago. But there are many on the market, and some adhesives are somewhat irritating to some people and less to others. There are ways that people's mouth shapes, whether they have facial hair or not. I mean, there's all kinds of factors. I like just sort of regular medical tape, micropore tape, but there are many kinds. And even I often, when I'm out of that tape, I often just use regular Scotch tape.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A
Okay.
little postage stamp size. It works just fine. So you don't even have to get fancy on this. And people often, the next question somebody might be thinking, because I'm just anticipating, because this is what patients ask me. First, they say, "What kind of tape?" And secondly, they ask, like, "That sounds scary. What if I can't breathe?" Or I know it sounds scary. I too thought it was a little jarring at first, but honestly, I mean, I can even talk with the tape on. You are not closed shut. You are not, you are not going to stop breathing at night. And there's room between the tape, between your lips to open. You can take it off anytime. You could push it through with your tongue and take it off. I mean, or take it off with your hand. But often, sometimes I wake up and it's pushed off by me. I don't know how. But it is not dangerous or scary, but just start easy. Don't do it very lightly. Find a tape that feels good to you. Do very small pieces if you like. Whatever it works for you. But I would encourage people to try it. It's been quite effective for me and many patients that I've tried it with.
Yeah. And so let me ask you the mechanics of it. So you're taking a little piece of tape and putting it across both lips, like from sort of what is this called? What's Cupid's bow?
The
Is that what it's called?
frenulum.
Yeah. Right.
No, that's not the frenulum. Anyway, that cleft in the middle
Right.
of
The
your lip.
cleft, right? From that cleft. And then you're taping all the way down to like below your
Yes.
lower lip. Just
Yes,
one piece in
exactly.
the middle.
Just one piece in the middle.
Okay.
And like I said, I mean, I've done it with Scotch tape too, many times, especially when I'm traveling and I forget to bring anything. Um, Yeah, and so there's lots of, if you Google mouth tape, there's kinds. I know James Nestor talks about specific brands in his book. I can't remember which ones, but there are many, and so you just kind of have to try out which adhesive works for you and which one feels best on your skin.
Okay, amazing. I think I'm going to try it. I've been sort of avoiding it. I know that I should be doing it, and I have a couple of friends who are dentists who are like, "You got to do this. You have to do this," and I haven't done it, but I feel like maybe I need to.
Yeah, my husband and I sort of laugh about it because it's. Let me tell you, it's not the sexiest way to go to sleep, but um, but we do laugh about it because often we both are doing it and we just kind of look at each other and laugh like, where have we come to? But I guess, 25 years after you're married, I guess that's where you are. But you can only put it on when you're ready to go to sleep, allow whatever else to happen. But anyway, it's pretty useful. And for one, I also think this really helps with Avanti, what you were asking about, how to get people to nasally breathe more in the day. I am trying, I am a work in progress. I'm just being honest, like it's hard for me. But I think the night nasal breathing is helping me get into more of a habit too. And so it feels a little bit like slowly but surely the daytime efforts are a little easier, but still a long way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think yeah, because it's a little bit of muscle memory and you're starting to breathe in that direction. I also think that, even using sort of the mindful pauses throughout the day, if this is something that you're really serious about doing and you're thinking this could really help you, put that alarm on that silly phone that we carry everywhere, make it beneficial to your health and, to take a minute and maybe just practice some nasal breathing, right? And to breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And then as you get better, do an inhale and an exhale through your nose. And then you could maybe graduate to doing it when you're walking or, exercising, right? Do it so that it's a good win, like a quick win for you, right? You don't want to sort of say, okay, when I'm doing my like really, really intense workout, I'm going to be nasal breathing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not there yet.
Not
And
necessarily the best place to start.
yeah, and I like that you're reminding people of that because I also will often myself and advise people to, just try for 30 seconds or a minute of your walk to be really mindful of that nasal breath, and don't make it that it has to be a perfect thing where you're doing it the whole time, and make it so that it's more and more of an effort that becomes more and more natural.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Really interesting. I'm gonna have to try this practice. I didn't actually
All
write
right,
about,
you'll report back to us.
I will, because, I didn't actually write about, mouth taping as a practice in the book. I mean, because it's not something that we did in Ayurveda. Um, but it's an interesting practice to add, if this is something that you're interested in and are really feeling like your mitochondria could use a boost and you're feeling like that's one of the mechanisms of aging that's causing problems for you. I think it's a great thing to try. So,
Yeah, I agree.
all right. Well, we've just talked about three different mechanisms. So, numbers 4 through 6, which again, for everyone review, is protein damage is the first mechanism of aging. The next one is dysregulated nutrient sensing. And then the last mechanism that we just talked about is mitochondrial dysfunction. And for everyone who's listening, if you didn't hear about the first three mechanisms of aging, we talked about that in part 1 of this series. It's linked below. And we will be doing the last three mechanisms of aging in part 3 of the series, which will be coming out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. And
Yes.
your book is available for pre order. So I'm going to remind everyone that it's coming out December 17th and that you can pre order it now anywhere books are sold. And it's a good way to understand, these 3 episodes are a good way to understand a small snippet of what you can learn about longevity in the book. So,
I appreciate that. Yeah, and if you pre-order, there's all kinds of pre-order bonuses.
oh, right.
You'll get a sneak peek of the book, you'll get entered into all kinds of giveaways, and then you also get access to my longevity course that will be starting in February. It's an Instagram longevity course that will be 5 weeks long, and you will be personally guided by me, and you'll get Q&A sessions with me, group coaching once a week for 5 weeks. So please sign up and make sure that you go to the website page. It's linked in the show notes, and you can sign up there to get all your bonuses as well. So thank you for talking about the book. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yes. Tanmeet, thank you so much for doing this with me. I always love talking to you, and we'll be back again next time.
Can't wait.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening to The Healing Catalyst. If you love what you heard, please hit follow and pass it along to a friend. And if you're feeling really inspired, please rate and review so that others can find this podcast more easily. To learn more, head to avantikumarsingh.com. And to connect with me directly, find me on Instagram at avantikumarsingh. I'll be back next week and hope that you will be too. Until then, remember, with the right catalyst, you have the power to activate your own healing, because healing starts within.